very crucial to understand also what are the key elements, what are the dimensions that we look into when we are talking about digital culture. Digital culture is something, maybe something new in terms of a terminology, but it goes back to all these key elements that we see and that foster a company culture. The digital culture, though, has some other elements as well that they additionally enrich this kind of culture and shows if the company has a digital, for example, mindset or a data-driven approach. So let's dig into a little bit some of the dimensions and the measurements here. So you see 7 dimensions that constitute the digital culture. And next to that, you will see that there are some keywords that characterize certain behaviors that we see, that we observe during our company's discussions that demonstrate that either the company has or has not a tendency or an inclination towards having a digital culture. So if we take the first example, the external and open keywords that we see here as a dimension for the digital culture, that means how much and how often are we thinking, are we executing, and are we planning towards having an extrovert environment towards our customers, towards our partnerships? How open are we based on that? Are we driven by them, or are we driven by our own internal strategy and our internal plans? The second one mentions about the decision making. So how agile are we? So how flexible are we on our decision making? Are we very strict to the rules, which is, for example, the boldness and the risk taking on your innovative procedure? When you have a digital culture in your organization, you will see that you are bold enough to take risks, to take innovative steps, to appreciate that something different or something new is proposed on the table, and you will take your time before rejecting it to really appreciate this new idea and understand if it's worth having a discussion around it or having a plan around it to try it. So the other dimension that is measuring the digital culture, let's say, index, is how lean are you in terms of culture? So how much do you iterate? How much do you take actions to correct previous mistakes? How do you make sure, it's a little bit connected to the agile methodology. How do you ensure that you take continuous actions in order to iterate and make into perfection your plans, your products, your relationships, your services towards your customers and towards your employees? The fifth dimension regards the transparency, the openness, the interaction within your company. Are you open? Do you discuss with everybody in your organization about your strategy, about your goals, about your risks, about your failures? Are you open and transparent with what ticks with your customers, what didn't tick with your customers? Or are you completely working in silos with your teams and do not interact within this company? It's very important to have this in mind. The sixth element regards the data-driven decision-making. As we said before, it's not just about being agile or flexible. It also has to do with how much do we use data in order to take informative decisions. Are we relying on data to do that, or are we relying mostly towards, based on our experience, based on how things were working so far? How do we think or feel rather than we see, we measure, and we execute on data? And the last dimension, which is very important as well, and these two last dimensions actually constitute the digital focus of digital culture measurements, it regards about the digital mindsets. So if you're using, for example, technology to serve your customers, to collaborate with your employees, to measure and achieve results, then you are pretty much very towards and very inclined towards having a digital culture. If you are mostly inclined to not to use that, if you are mostly an analog, let's say, company, that you have all these kind of, paperwork and a lot of processes, offline processes, and you're pretty much used in getting into the phone or face-to-face meeting rather than having also some digital aspects in your collaboration, for example, or meeting with your customer. That means that your mindset is pretty much more inclined towards the analog rather than digital. It doesn't have to be fully digital always. The right mix of both is important. And measuring and understanding where you are in your company towards digital culture is very important to give you an overview of how easy or difficult it would be to transition digitally in your transformation process.